Hey, this is Dennis, and welcome to another episode of the Grounded Reason podcast, where Joel and I get together and talk about cord cutting and topics around the internet. So this week, we actually got a lot of good feedback about last week's cord cutting episode, and we had a few questions about the various services at the end that we kind of ran through, like your Hulu TV and your Sling TV, and I'm just want to let people know that we are going to plan a show where we kind of just go through all of them.
Yeah, we did one of those, I guess it was last year. It's been that long.
But at that time, it was really just PlayStation and View. And Sling.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot's
and
come
now
about
there's,
since then.
Hulu Live and
Yeah, I think, we did a separate episode on DirecTV Now. But, I mean, I think it would probably be good for everybody if we just kind of, we can't go through every single channel and every single service, but we can kind of give you an idea of what to expect and what the major differences and pros and cons are of each one. So that's going to be, so stay tuned for that one. But today, I think we also want to keep it on the cord cutting tip a bit. And we're going to talk about kind of where the internet is going in the future. And we did a little bit about this when we talked about zero rating. I think, what was that episode? I think it was 29, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds right.
26. It was episode 26.
You had it upside down.
I did. I do that all the time. Reverse dyslexia. But because it wasn't really backwards, it was just upside down.
Yeah, I think that's still dyslexia.
Is it? I'm not sure. So I guess today's show is kind of going to center around the changes that are happening as it comes to wireless.
Yeah.
Because now, when you think of internet access, you think of typically, wires to your house that you plug into a router that kind of powers your home network.
Yep.
And it's always, I get questions sometimes, is like, can I use cell data service for internet? And the problem really isn't speed anymore, because 4G is kind of, right. There's some 4G implementations. The data plan.
Yeah. The cost.
There's the cost, and it's the amount, it's the capacity, because they're capped. They usually, even if you get one of these unlimited plans, if you're tethering, then they have like a 10 gigabyte monthly cutoff.
Didn't we do an episode on, what was it, AT&T's kind of sort of unlimited?
It's all of them. Yeah, they all have sort of
unlimited.
Yeah, because it's unlimited until you get to a limit. Right. I think is how it's pushed.
God, that's annoying.
Isn't it? It's hysterical.
Words matter.
Well, they used to. So once you get to when you're tethering, which is what you would need to do. When I say tethering, it is basically using your cell phone as kind of a internet hotspot.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will also, I've had people say, well, I'll just I can still use Chromecast. And no, because the way Chromecast works is it's kind of tethering. You might not consider it tethering when you push your, app to your TV. But what's really happening is you're sharing that. You need a Wi-Fi connection for that, the Chromecast. So it's going to grab off your phone, and then it has to connect up with the service.
The app you use doesn't change the amount of bandwidth.
Right. You're going to need your own internet. You're going to need your own internet connection for it to work and not count against your data plan.
Right. Exactly.
So they put these caps in place, and then it's just not viable right now. But there is, and if you follow some of the more tech-based news websites, you've probably heard that there is a new generation of wireless technology coming out. And we've covered it here on the show before, called 5G, which really just means fifth generation. Current generation is the 4G, also known, you also hear LTE thrown around, because that's really the standard technology that 4G is based on.
And just to give people a point of reference for some of those various sites, some of the ones you've tried to turn me on to, or I think Fierce Wireless.
They talk about it, because that's that is a website that deals pretty much with people in the wireless space. So you'll see it there. Ars Technica does a pretty good job, as usual.
Well, they do most
everything. Verge
right
does a really good job too, covering the stuff. So what 5G is it's not truly a standard yet. there was originally a plan to have it kind of standardized by 2019 or 2020, but like there's been such good feedback on some of the early testing that they're really trying to kind of speed up the rollout plan of 5G, which is good and bad, because while they're speeding up the rollout plan, these companies, they're not really going to speed up the standardization of it, which makes it easy for companies like AT&T to call something 5G, but it's really using 4G technology with some techniques of 5G to kind of squeeze extra speed out. So it's definitely faster than 4G, but it's still using old 4G technology.
Well, so I think I talked about the analogy to like just totally different market, but the railroads when they first started up, and like the lack of standardization where everyone ran on their own size gauge in the railroads, right? Like so.
Oh, you mean the size? Yeah, the gauge,
the
the
actual
size
gauge
of the track,
right? Yeah, and the initial thought was like I want to control what runs on my rails, so I'll build my specialized gauge. Well, so the wireless market has gotten to where it's figured out everybody runs at the same gauge, right? Like,
yeah, well, yeah, there's a whole
innovation goes faster.
Yeah, well, yeah, when you standardize or use a certain design pattern and you're like, here's your tech set, then it's much easier to sit there and develop to it.
Well, and you just end up having a much larger market, and that's what the actual transportation market figured out a long time ago, and so like the wireless market has figured that out. What's a little frustrating with this is until a standard is actually officially released, someone can get away with saying, like Dennis was mentioning, AT&T's doing right now, with saying something is 5G without it actually being. Like, it's not possible for something to be 5G right now because no one has agreed to what that is.
Right. I mean, and there's a good sense of what those technologies are going to be. It's going to, I mean, really, a big part of it is using what they're calling small cell.
Right.
And that's really just kind of throwing a whole bunch of smaller like transmitters out there, and kind of like a net almost. Yeah. And it'll be real easy to sit there and kind of like, build. It's cheaper to build this out into rural areas, basically, is what it is. And they're doing tests where they're getting about like 1.82 gigabits per second speed out of this technology at like up to 100 meters. Wow. I mean, 1,000 meters, excuse me, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And can you imagine like wireless gigabit internet is kind of where they're like looking at going with this. Now, Verizon is, and I want to say Verizon's actually playing this kind of honest, where they're using actual what would be probably fit into the 5G standard when it comes to developing when they're pushing out their 5G beta rollout. Because I think they're in 11, they have like 11 beta markets going. Yeah, I mean, and they're rolling it out to like, in those 11 areas, they're rolling it out to like various people, like to bring them in to test it. Now, Verizon is interesting because, and I talked about this before, what I said is like 5G will kind of change the way internet is delivered. And Verizon, I think, is they might, I don't know if they listen to the podcast or what, but that's kind of their marketing push on this.
Well, go ahead.
No, and I was, which is kind of funny in the telecom industry, or in the wireless space for some reason, because Verizon announced this. They said that they're really excited when it comes to how like they will be able to deliver like television over 5G. Right. And T-Mobile was like, ha ha ha, quaint little Verizon. We're going to do virtual reality. And they're talking about all of these like new cutting edge technologies, where Verizon is kind of just sitting back and is like, no, we think kind of television is where it is.
Well, that was what really struck me as kind of funny.
Yeah,
when I was
I
reading
laughed
this
because
article.
I'm like, T-Mobile, you idiot! Like technology, like television is kind of like been around and proven way to like make a profit.
Yeah,
So-
and so shameless plug for the blog. So the catchphrase with that is revolution for through tech evolution.
Yep.
And one of the things that I've always liked about iterative development or any of those things is it's lots of small bets, right? Like move the needle, right? I'm mixing metaphors. Yikes. But like but something like what T-Mobile's doing, where they're going directly from our current world to 5G augmented reality and so on. That's a really big leap. And I'm not saying it won't pay off.
No,
Who knows?
because virtual
Right?
reality has legs now, but it's still
No one's figured out how to make any money doing it.
Yeah,
And
it's a separate space that needs to be proven out on its own
whereas-
before you're going to sit there and put your new infrastructure bet on it.
Well, and the point I'm making, right, is exactly that. It's Verizon has identified like, hey, here's this incremental step towards where we're probably going,
Right.
which is more where T-Mobile's trying to leapfrog to, which is we need to be able to deliver the, for lack of a better term, cable type experience wirelessly.
Right, like a pay
Right?
pay TV over
And that would be a huge thing. I mean, for all of us people that consume streaming services, wouldn't that be nice to just do that? And the other nice thing is that it allows different types. Like one of the things the cable companies have always had that was kind of not always, but since probably mid 2000s when they started really offering broadband and VoIP, was they could do these nice bundles, right? And they could, from business model perspective, they could really lock people in. Like Comcast had the triple play, is what they called it, where they could lock you in and they'd have a whole lot of your life tied up in there. So that makes you, from an industry perspective, what they call sticky,
Right.
which means it's really hard for you to leave their contract.
Yeah, because you have to leave. Like even if you have those three services, you might be like, man, this internet really sucks. But I like the phone service and the TV service is pretty decent.
Well, and
so I will like deal with that crappy part of the bundle for those other two things.
I gotta then and if I decide to, break it off, right? Like it's like getting divorced. I got to figure out how to do all these things on my own that I didn't used to do on my own.
Right.
And, so now you get a potential other bundle by an entirely separate group of, large companies, right? Like, because you've got the AT&Ts and Verizons. Well, I guess Verizon already does it, but this would be a different segment.
Yeah, it's a different way. And in the TV space, while Verizon is a big name in wireless, it's kind of it's not a small player.
It's smaller, though.
But it's a much smaller than Comcast, Charter, AT&T, and I mean they only have about 9 million pay TV subscribers, which,
and they're probably mostly over here in the Mid-Atlantic and the East Coast.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's in a small section from Boston to Virginia. Is really
and there's a lot of us in that general area.
Yeah,
but nowhere near the overall country.
And there's also a lot of other competition in those areas.
Yeah,
too.
That's totally true. Because Comcast is in every one of those markets.
Right. Yeah. Along with a bunch of small players, too. So
yeah, it just makes sense to me, the idea of what Verizon's doing, where they're taking a step that seems like it would make the market more competitive and probably gobble up a little bit of market share.
Right.
And it also gives more differentiated services So from a business model perspective, like it just allows them to catch more customers at what they're willing to pay.
Yeah. Like I always like it. Like T-Mobile is like the Guy Fieri
Yeah.
of like wireless service. It's like the guy that's always like, yeah, like he's just
to
running
the
around,
extreme.
yeah, talking smack about everything. Like, yeah, but he's like, oh, T-Mobile's like Verizon and their television over 5G.
They're delivering live talkies over.
I know.
They're
like, we're gonna put on goggles and go to the moon on your next T-Mobile 5G service.
Right. And it's like, not everything needs to be quite so novel.
I know.
Right? Like, how about you just, I don't need a, 3D holographic mousetrap.
Right.
I just need a better one.
Yeah, T-Mobile, can I just watch Game of Thrones? That's all I
For
really
a
wanna
little
do.
less money?
Maybe Walking Dead every once in a while.
Every now and again.
That's all we want. See, that's what that sound means.
That's what that sound means.
So,
put your phone on vibrate.
yeah. So Verizon, they're like you mentioned Fierce Wireless. An article was out there, and it was titled "Verizon More Excited Than Ever About Fixed Wireless for 5G." Basically, internet to your house is what they mean by the fixed wireless. And they were saying how because a big knock on 5G is it needs a line of sight.
Right.
And like if any of you guys out there use an antenna, you know what we mean. It's like if your tower can, if the TV tower has a line of sight to your house, you'll get much better reception than if something's in the way.
Well, and back to your earlier point, that's why they're talking about lots of small nodes.
Right.
Right? So you get more lines of sight. It gives you further and further coverage. And you actually, so here in the United States, we have a legacy of, same in at least Western Europe, we have like a legacy of landline telephones.
Mm-hmm.
When wireless cell phones, well, that's redundant, but when cell phones started to become pretty common, right? You started seeing in the developing economies them leapfrog by just establishing cheap towers, like cell towers all over the place. It was really, really cheap to build, and you didn't have to build the best one in the world, right? You just built a lot of them. And all of a sudden, you could get phone coverage over a significant swath of like whatever your territory was.
Yeah, because landline infrastructure
is really expensive.
Right. And so like what it took us decades to build here in the US, some African nation was able to like
that was the biggest example.
Put a phone network together literally overnight.
Yeah, I mean it's generally so like the countries that this is typical of any technical innovation, right? Like the countries that develop technologies, right, especially the technologies that lead into other technologies,
right,
have to displace. The others get to leapfrog because they're not doing whatever step 1 and 2 are.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like
but sometimes they can skip right to 3.
The first caveman that picked up a rock and smashed a nut, it took him probably months to figure that out.
Yeah, but
next day, everyone's smashing the nut with a rock.
Right, and the day after that, everyone's just getting planners, and they can get like nuts on demand.
Yeah,
right? That's a lot of saying the word nuts.
That's exactly that. Is a lot of that.
It's getting a little blue in here. But so, anyways, like to me, like I look at it and I go, something like this, like the 5G, I think has the potential to be a really, really big deal.
Oh, it's definitely it is going to be a big deal. Like there's no way that I can't. I mean, like Verizon was in the article at Fierce Wireless. Like we were just talking about the big knock was line of sight.
Yeah,
and in it they were saying, well, while that that's old thinking.
Yeah,
like that is because when it was a problem, we didn't have the compute power that we do now.
Sure.
Because when you're sending that signal, the compute power we have now does a much better job of decoding that signal, which means it could have a lot more noise in it I mean, and you could still pull what you need out of that signal. So Verizon, as an example, they were saying how at 2,000 feet from a receiver, they were getting it was delivering 1.8 gigs at
Wow.
2,000 feet. They drove it over. They basically went to the other side of, because they were testing this at Samsung's technology park. It's not an
Right.
amusement park. It sounds like one though. And they drove all the way to the other side to where they were like 2,000 feet with a building in the way that would completely completely block
Should
the receiver.
disrupt line of sight.
They were getting 1.4 gigabytes.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So the technology looks like it's getting there.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like we were talking about earlier, you can always saturate the landscape with these nodes,
Right.
if they're small enough to where they're not disruptive to the landscape.
Yeah, and I was reading, even in like major disruptions, like storms might be an issue, like rain, like causes problems. You're still going to be able to deliver probably like a decent service, like 200 megabytes a second.
Yeah. I mean, so let's back up for a second, because we are all creatures that are constantly unsatisfied with whatever the newest, I get something, right? Like, actually, I saw Louis C.K. doing this thing where he was talking about he's in a plane and there's a guy sitting next to him, and they're both getting ready to go on the Wi-Fi, and it was the newest thing at the time, right? Like Wi-Fi. They're 30,000 feet
right, on a
over the earth. Yeah, they're flying
which
through
now
the
is
air.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
go
big
back
deal
a few
at
years,
the time, right? Like, it wasn't that long ago. And they came across the loudspeaker and said, "Hey, we apologize. The the Wi-Fi has gone out." And the guy next to him goes, "Oh my god!"
I know,
right, and Louis C.K. was like, how quickly does a brand new thing become something you demand of the world?
Yeah, I should be able to communicate with everyone on the ground.
He said something like, "You are in the air, flying 600 miles per hour, sitting in a chair."
Right. And someone's bringing you drink.
It's a miracle, right? So to me, that's kind of how I think about 5G, right? If I was getting if 200 megabits, was what we were all given today. If one was waived and that's what 5G was and that's what we got, we'd all be loving life.
Yeah, it's all relative.
Right? But if we go to 1.4 and we get cut back to 200, world's coming to an end.
Well, that's like when I first, and I've said this before, I used to use a dial-up modem, when I first started, and there was a program. It was free at the time called C Show, and C Show would allow you to look at pictures. So, but the thing is if you're looking at a picture on the internet on a modem that's running at 2400,
yeah, you're getting
and KPS.
You're getting pixels painting.
I mean, yeah, kilobits per second. It is. It's literally a line is slowly drawing.
Yeah, that
the
made
picture
naughty pictures really a pain.
You wouldn't. You would. Why bother? It's just okay. So my mom could come down the stairs in the next 5 minutes.
Why bother?
While
I was a teenager. That's why you bothered.
So, but now. You'd wait 10 minutes for the picture to load.
Right.
And now it's if I hit the search button on an app or whatever, and I don't have delivery within 2 seconds, I'm what the hell is going on with the internet? Yeah. Losing my mind.
Yeah.
So
I think no matter what, 5G is going to be a pretty darn big deal. Another thing that occurred to me when I was reading over this is I forget what it was, but it's the FCC was cutting back on the rural plan for broadband.
Yes, this will be a
Right?
big solution.
This is gonna help that a lot.
Because it's going to be much cheaper for them
I
to
don't know
just
how else you
throw it
get
out
to
there.
rural America.
Well, AT&T
without
is
this.
actually looking at this as at replacing, like, talk about low expectations. They're looking at this to replace their DSL service. So if you want to pick on someone, T-Mobile, I think that's there's a better target for you.
Touche, but
no, but they're right. They're completely right. It is a good way.
It is the smart way for them to do it, right? Like you pick the most archaic piece of like what you got, because right now AT&T's customers that are consuming their normal services are probably not that upset. But anyone who's using DSL who's seen anything broadband is not a happy camper. So you fix it for all those people, and by the time you're done with that, you can fix it for the broadband people.
Yeah. And like you can tell, like Verizon is, you can kind of see what their game plan is here, because they just also announced that they're putting together another streaming service over the internet. They're basically going to be throwing their hat in the ring with like your DirecTV Nows and Sling. And I heard it could be as early as like July, like when they start pushing this out. I mean, but that's just rumors. So like there's no concrete date, but they're looking like soon to be putting something together. And companies like that, they already have the deal-making mechanisms in place to get those
got a lot of existing relationships with all those content providers.
Yeah, so it looks like they're really excited because they finally see a way, because wireless is where they are. They have like probably the best coverage out of anybody.
That's really their expertise.
Right. So for them they're going to be able to leverage this and deliver, pay TV service pretty much across the nation.
Think about like even just
eventually.
Well, yeah, eventually.
Like I'm sure they'll start in their Fios zones, because you still got to get this thing to the backhaul.
Yeah.
Like you still need, because you can put 5G out there, but you still, if you want to have internet access, you're still going to have to get it to the existing infrastructure somehow. So they're not going to just be able to overnight go nationwide. They're going to have to run, Title II would make this very easy if it stayed in place, because then, AT&T's infrastructure gets shared with Verizon. Verizon gets shared with AT&T and everybody else.
But we said we weren't going to talk about the FCC today.
Oh, not. I'm talking about how good it would be if Title II was still in place.
You're talking about the FCC.
Comment, people. Go comment. Comment quickly. We need Title II.
Hashtag Batagit.
Hashtag Batagit. Okay, so back to 5G.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking about with this is, going back to the rural America. Like, so we happen to live in an area that offers Fios and
Verizon Fios.
Yeah,
if you don't live in this area, you're probably like, what the fuck is that? Fios?
but Verizon Fios. So like we have fiber, and like it's pretty fast, and generally we're in decent shape, but we're in a pretty major metropolitan area.
Yeah, they just started offering gigabit for $70 a month.
Not bad at all.
No, it's not.
No,
I didn't get it because they're still that means they're offering like 50 MIPS, which is plenty to cut the cord for like $39 a month, which is really good. So,
but here's where I'm going with this. Like, so fast forward a couple years, right? And there's a whole bunch of, I won't bore everyone with it, but like a whole bunch of economics books on this idea of the long tail. So if you think of a distribution curve that is slanted to the right, which basically means like you think of how the bulk of our population in this country lives in major metropolitan areas.
Right.
It's about 65, 67% of the population lives in major metropolitan areas. That leaves the other 33-ish% that lives in rural America.
Right.
If you can gobble up that 33%, through plans like this, that's a heck of a lot of market share. That's kind of out there on the table.
Little secret here. That's how I run my blog.
Yeah.
I go for the long tail. And that's actually a thing in like, I mean, I'm gonna go like kind of like a little deep into nerdism here when it
Yeah.
comes to
Well,
like search engine optimization.
I was just doing that too. So.
But really that's what we call it.
Yeah.
And the idea be long tail. And the idea being it's easier for me to write an article with a keyword that is, 5 or 6, like when you go into Google and you search for something and you searched for, how do I watch TV without cable? Well, I wrote an article that actually has that written as a header in one of their, in the article somewhere in hopes that that would get picked up by Google because it's much easier for, there's less people writing articles with that word
specific
in it
phrase
than writing the article,
about
how do I cut the cord
or whatever.
Right. So it's the same principle. And then that's what Joel's basically saying is it's much, there's a lot of money to be made or, eyes to come view my article when you go after that piece of the market that isn't obvious.
Well, exactly that. And what I'm saying, particularly with the ISP market, those people, that 30%-ish population in rural America, are dramatically underserved.
Oh, yes. It's
Right.
horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
and I know, yeah, okay, there's
We're
people
quibbling here in like metropolitan areas. Same idea if you're in LA, Austin, New York, Chicago, wherever.
Yeah, and I know someone out there is losing their mind about people starving in the street, and that's horrible, yes. But I mean, we're talking, it's all relative, and we're talking about, like I view the internet as kind of
It's a big deal.
It is. Like we say this a lot. It's like, you got food, water, electricity,
Security,
house, then probably internet is next.
Yeah, pretty close.
All right, and it's and not only that, but the amount of upward mobility in society when you actually have a decent internet connection, it's like night and day.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a reason why scholars coined the phrase "the digital divide," right? Like it's I mean, you can look at it in terms of actual tax returns, right? Like when they lay it out demographically and they talk about like areas where there's decent coverage, you can see a dip in income.
Yeah, well, you could look at per capita, like, and not average, because average is deceiving when it comes to income. But if you look at the median income of states compared to the median bandwidth of states, it kind of tells a story.
Well, yeah, because if I lived in Washington, Mr. Gates skews things pretty dramatically.
Right.
Or if I live in Nebraska,
right,
Mr. Buffett scores things dramatically.
Yeah, or even like California or New York. I mean, because, there's a lot of money at the top in those areas. Yeah. But still, I mean.
So that's why I say median is.
Texas is a really good example of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of poor folks out there and, a few, people who got rich off of like some like black liquid that came out of the ground.
Yeah.
So.
Very valuable. It's black gold.
Is that
Texas tea.
So Verizon's doing some, like they have some good ambitions here, some big ambitions. It's going to add some competition into this market. It's going to be good for cord cutters. Now AT&T, while they're, as we said earlier, they're I guess pre-5G is a good word for this because it's not technically 5G.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like bad service. I just don't like that they're marketing it as a standard that is not agreed upon.
Right. But so AT&T has the potential here to become like Comcast on steroids.
Right.
Because they already have, I would say they're equal to Verizon when it comes to, their wireless capabilities.
Yeah.
But they just,
they already got DirecTV.
Yeah, they just bought Time Warner's content. Like, so they own all this content. And now I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the FCC, but net neutrality goes away. There's really no way for them to regulate them. There's nothing that's going to stop AT&T from saying, hey, if you use DirecTV Now, you don't have to pay for it. We'll just give it to you.
They're already toying with the notion,
Right?
Like, because they already announced an offer where they were going to do, what was it?
It's zero rating over the 4G. It's basically saying if you have
$5 for DirecTV, was that what it was?
Well, no, it's not even that. It's like it won't, like you can watch DirecTV now on your AT&T data plan, and it doesn't count against your data.
That's what it was.
So, short term for customers, that is great. Long term for customers, it's going to stink
because generally anti-competitive.
Because what's going to happen is it's going to be a mad rush. The only players you're basically shrinking the market because right now if you have it separated, if you have these industries separated out where you have your internet and then you have your content, then the competition in those areas, if they're robust, you're going to get decent prices and decent choice for customers.
Sure.
If you combine them, is kind of what this is doing into a single market, then you're only going to have companies with a ton of money who can put out decent infrastructure and buy up a lot of content. They're really going to be the only game in town.
Yep.
And you're going to have a situation kind of worse than the one we're in now when it comes to pay TV. Because now you're not dealing with just triple play, you're dealing with quad play.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about cell service, landline service if you want it, pay TV, and internet.
Yeah, you're building in all of the infrastructure services with the actual content providing.
Right. And it limits competition on who can compete in that. Because now you can't just, like, if you are a single, if your gig is only providing content, you're not playing in that game.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be able to offer anybody internet. If your gig is only internet and you don't have any content, see ya, no one's going to buy that.
I'll scare you real bad with this one. What you end up with long term is oligopolist behavior, right? Like, so imagine you're AT&T and you've gobbled up enough market share, right, through your semi-monopolistic power to where you control the majority of the subscribers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So now the only ones who actually create content, right, are those that are providing it to someone who can deliver it to someone who can watch it.
Yeah.
Right? Walmart was notorious. I mean, like the classic example is the company stores. When you talk about the old coal mines, which is like, my family was
Appalachia.
Yeah. Appalachia. And so like, I owe my soul to the company store.
Right.
But like Walmart,
you work all day so you can spend your whole check.
Yeah, so you can spend your
whole check. And buy food from the company store.
But it also works with like, something like, or a better analogy is like Walmart, where they would turn around to a provider, someone who sold them the ketchup that they would put on their shelves,
mm-hmm.
right? And say, hey, if you want to be on Walmart shelves, you're going to provide it to us at this price.
Right, because everybody wants to be
on Walmart shelves, because Walmart stores, at least at, not that long ago, were everywhere. Now Amazon has since changed that.
Yes.
It's Amazon, but
now everybody wants to be an Amazon store.
It's that kind of conceptual thing. And to me, when it gets to, like, we look at the world we're in right now, where television, amazing programs are just everywhere,
mm-hmm.
right? People refer to it as a second golden age, right?
Right, it is. There's so much great content out there.
I worry about it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, because it's the reason why this exists is, I mean, remember before Netflix? Before, like, Netflix and Amazon Originals.
Yeah.
Like, what? Name a good show. They were all on HBO, honestly. Like, really, you had HBO as really the only network that kicked out quality stuff.
So let's say Game of Thrones steps back 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Breaking Bad's probably about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
Yeah, I mean, because
Walking Dead's about 7 years ago. So you're talking, if you start listing them all off, they're all within the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? And you go, that's not that long, right? To where we were all watching American Idol not that long ago.
Oh yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, I'm sure. People watch The Voice and shows like that, but it doesn't get nearly the play as.
Don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place for those shows. I've watched some of The Voice.
Yeah,
okay?
well, it's easy. It's one of those shows where you don't even need to pay attention.
Yeah,
your kids are in the room. You look up every
nice
once in a while.
song,
right.
and it's fun, right? Whatever. I'm not judging it, but what I'm saying is that
it's not.
That was the only game in town for a while.
And let's. Even if you're the biggest fan of The Voice, we can agree that it's not art. I mean, it's not it's not interesting as far as good TV goes.
No, or at least, I'll take a bad episode of The Americans over a good episode of The Voice almost every day.
Let's be honest. A good New York subway act can compete with The Voice.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's but I mean, that's kind of where television was. It really was.
Yeah. I mean, we were all watching The Situation, 10 years ago on Jersey Shore or whatever, so that's what I mean is reality television came to a screeching halt for the most part, right? There's still some out there.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden there were ways for people to make money by putting out the type of work they really wanted to do.
Right. And all these cable channels that switched to jump onto the reality TV bandwagon, like Discovery and the
History Channel did.
Yeah, History Channel and the Learning Channel, which is no longer even called that. It's TLC now. They all basically rebranded themselves. Look at frickin' Bravo, for Christ's sake.
Right.
Bravo used to be
it was like the High Art Channel.
Yeah, it really was. And now it's I think it's the Housewives Channel for the most part.
More
it's
or
pretty
less,
much all you have. So a lot of those, Discovery announced recently that they're looking to rebrand themselves back to their roots, where they want to go more,
back towards sciences. And
exactly. And I mean, there's rumblings that TLC wants to do that as well. And the reason is, calling back to what you said earlier, they need to go after the long tail because they need niche, more niche content because there's so many players out there right now. They need to make themselves stand out somehow. So the best way to do that is to grab some niche market where they know that there's going to be there's not going to be a lot of
small loyal following,
right? And they can make a profit on that, and that's and that's good for everyone.
Well, they scale down to that, right? They go, hey, we're only going to take our most profitable shows. So if all of a sudden the Carl Sagan follow on to that, which is Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos type thing, right? Is their show. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what channel that's on now, but that as an example, then, that's what they build themselves towards.
Yes.
Right? That type of audience. They have the show that follows that is something related to science.
Right.
Right.
And to take it back, if AT&T can zero rate their content, and provide, internet, phone, content, cell service for a price that you're willing to pay, there's not many companies that can do that right now.
No, and so seeing AT&T push the way they're doing,
history's repeating itself. Because if you remember, AT&T, we did this episode a little while ago,
right?
But they owned the entire internet infrastructure
at
one point. So I mean, and we made a bunch of rules and put a bunch of rules in place so that wouldn't happen again.
Yep.
And now it has the potential of happening again.
Yeah.
And again, it's because they're going to overturn Title II, which is going to overturn net neutrality. I mean, the FCC is going to do this, and that's really setting this up. AT&T has the potential to rule the world again because of Ajit Pai's madness.
We said we weren't going to talk about the FCC and he who shall not be named.
Well, Joel, I'm sorry. This episode is really for the cord cutters out there that don't care about net neutrality. In the immortal words of Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
Yeah,
It was a,
exactly.
I need this to sink in, the cord cutters out there, that it's real important that you comment at the FCC and make sure that net neutrality stays in place. Regardless, I mean,
that Najit Pai is Voldemort.
He really is.
I don't know that for sure.
No, he is.
But allegedly.
Allegedly, he is Voldemort. He did drink unicorn blood. It's true.
It's true. Infowars.com.
Allegedly, yeah. Don't get in bed with a goblin. That was the liberal Alex Jones. Okay. So all the players right now, all the ISP players right now are seeing the importance of this. And you can tell, like Comcast, who has kind of been, the big player for a while now when it comes to delivering internet service, I think they're shaking in their boots because they just signed a deal with Charter, which basically says we both want to get into wireless. There's already players in that market that already know that business very well and already have a built up infrastructure. Let's not buy any wireless companies without each other's approval.
Yeah, which again, I was just saying this to you a minute ago when we were off air. I know that this is not technically cartel behavior, right? That it's legal, but it definitely seems to fly against the spirit of the law.
I mean, it depends how you look at it. Really, it's like, what is competing?
Right. Well, I would say if you and I were rival industry or rival companies in the same industry, and we said we weren't going to go actively buy up market share to compete against each other,
I would consider
that would be. Yeah. That would be.
But I mean, if you're Ajit Pai and you have that huge ideological block going on, like that screen in front of his eyes that like stops him from hearing any kind of reason that goes against what he thinks.
Every time you say his name, I hear a thunderclap.
I'm sorry,
I
can't help
stop?
it. I can't help it, man. It's a trap. So I mean, I don't see how they're not seeing that this is anti-competitive behavior. It
seems like it to me. I mean, like, one, someone's got to bring a suit for it to really get going.
Because that's how the FTC operates.
Yeah.
If it was the FCC, it wouldn't have to do that. They could just say, stop doing that.
In I don't think DOJ or the Federal Trade Commission would get involved unless someone actually brought it.
Yeah, because there needs to be some sort of customer harm from this, which there probably won't be. Really, when you look at it,
probably not, but it still seems pretty iffy on its surface.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if like Magneto and Doctor Doom were kind of gonna like decide that they were gonna buddy up and hang out all the time, and the Avengers were just like, no big deal.
I mean, I swear, I was gonna say the exact same thing.
Or I guess it would be like the Consumer Injustice League. I guess would be another one.
That's not a thing.
Well, no, I mean, to say if you want to go to the comic book.
No, I get you.
The Extraordinary League of Assholes. Or the League of Extraordinary Assholes would probably be better, actually.
Comcast and Charter
allegedly. I'm sorry.
Should fuck a duck. This deal made me want to spit on the floor.
I know. I was like, really? Really, these companies, like, okay, if it was like, Bob's Internet and, Mama whoever's ISP.
Mama Celeste's ISP.
Right, whatever. I'd be like, well, that might be a semi-large company. Who knows?
Whatever.
But yeah, I'd be like, whatever. But it's like.
And that's a highly technical term, but they should fuck a duck.
They should. Because, okay, out of you don't know, if you look at the number 1 and number 2 providers of internet service,
it's them.
It's those two guys. It's Comcast and it's Charter, and they're signing a non-compete on the.
Now it does only last a year.
It does only last a year, but it's a non-compete on the tech.
It's a long time.
It's a non-compete in technology. It's like decades. But they're signing a non-compete on the technology that is the future of the internet, the thing that they provide the most of.
Yeah. And so Dennis started out by saying like, hey, Comcast has been a little slow to the party with this, basically. And I remember it was 8 months ago ish, right? Because I turned around and all of a sudden we've been doing this for like almost a year.
Almost, yeah.
But it was about 8 months ago where we were talking about this, and I was just joking around saying, well, Comcast, like, the general rule is you can, if you're really rich, you can be a little dumb
You can, yeah.
and a little slow.
President, excuse me.
Right. But so like, and so Comcast's a little dumb, and so is Charter, and a little slow, but they finally come around. And the problem is they got really deep pockets, right? And just because they're saying like, hey, we got to talk about like what thing we're going to buy before they do it, doesn't mean they're not going to reach out there and gobble up some stuff.
Right.
Right? They just have to kind of let each other know.
Yeah, they're really looking at one another and say, look, we're both really screwed here when it comes to the future of our business. So let's
call a truce.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. It's like this shit snuck up on us.
Yeah. I don't know how.
We need to get our acts together.
Yeah.
So how about we don't mess with each other for right now? Because,
Let's take a year off from each other,
right,
and we're going to go pick on
the enemy of my
else.
friend is, that kind of deal.
Is the consumer, right?
Yeah. The consumer is the enemy, yes. So I wanted to point that out to everybody because really this whole episode is like, I know it's kind of gone a bit downhill, but there is hope out there because it looks like even if things kind of go down the tubes with Pi and the open internet, it could get ugly, but there's still a lot of opportunity for competition.
The technology set,
yes,
is going to free up a lot of competition inherently.
Yes, and it's going to be good for us in general, to have options out there. I mean, people out there who are like right now, if people are out there in, they have one provider and they might provide 5 MIPS and they listen to our podcast, it's like first world problems. It's like, oh, boo hoo, I don't get my 50 MIPS of internet when they're dealing with like 5 or 10. You out there will have options very soon because once 5G hits, it's obvious for those companies to kind of just, it's not going to be expensive for them to get out there.
No,
they can easily put these these base stations out there and
you don't need a ton of consumers to justify the cost of putting one of these nodes out there.
No, because they're not expensive. I mean, relatively, you can if you can put one node down and pick up 50 customers, it's probably worth it.
Yeah.
So
that's most everywhere.
I wanted this episode to kind of give hope to you all out there.
Well, I mean, like, the way I think about it is, like, things have been getting dramatic, like, with the way content is delivered over the internet, both from a speed and service perspective, like, things have been getting dramatically better for all of us that have broadband connectivity, right? Like, and they've been doing that year over year for a decade. If I had to put on my, like, forecaster hat, which is always a really bad idea, I'd say that's probably going to level off because of mistakes that are made in the policy realm.
Mm-hmm.
But for those that don't have broadband right now, I suspect it's going to get a lot better for a while, right? And that's because of the expansion of 5G. So I think there'll be some normalization across the market, which is probably, in general, a really, really good thing.
Right. Because, I mean, right now, I think it's been pushed by edge providers lately. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, like, everybody's coming out with a streaming service, which is causing a lot of competition in the internet market right now. I've noticed if you have more than one person or one company delivering internet, you're probably noticing price drops.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we are.
Yeah,
it's been a drastic change in price recently in our area.
I know I've been very gloom and doom about, like, the content provider, particularly with, like, the television industry, and the content delivered over it. But it is possible with all of those, underserved markets coming on, that's enough new eyeballs to offset the fact that other areas are getting, or that services are getting throttled, right? Like it's possible. Time will tell. My general concern is that we're needlessly shooting ourselves in the foot with policy, right? Like we are, because of the, I'm going to do it, the FCC's current direction.
This episode's a trap.
Yeah, it is. We're making things harder than they need to be.
Yo, yeah. I mean,
right? Like the FCC is, for whatever reason, screwing up a market that would be generally better served if they stayed out of the way.
Right. And they just kind of, like, Wheeler kind of put it in place how it needed to be. And it's been going pretty well since then, for at least for consumers. I don't know many consumers that are arguing. And if you look, I'm getting into it. I'm sorry. If you go and you look at FCC's comment section right now, I think it's like, last I checked, it was like 2.6 million comments.
Yeah.
Like 90% of them, if you get rid of the bots, the 400,000 bot comments, like 90% are in favor of Wheeler's actions.
And that's a question for all of you out there. Have you hugged your FCC comment section today?
Yeah, you need to go out there. I'll put every episode until, because they basically, they're leaving comments open until like mid-August, when they're actually going to make the decision on whether or not to roll back the open internet order, which basically is what we've been talking about. Every episode until that time, first thing I'll have right underneath the episode description is a link where you guys can just go out and comment. I commented again because because it's really, the first comment was to say it was against the proposal. Once they had their meeting on the 19th to finalize it, they basically put out the draft of what the proposal is. And even though there were like 2 million comments, it didn't change much. Right. Now they're asking for more comments on this proposal. So go out there and comment. And I actually put together an argument against like his reasoning on GPI's reasoning, because that's what he's saying they want to see. They don't want to see just comments saying net neutrality rules or Title II.
Yeah,
rules.
like my first comment was just cursing, which was probably a mistake.
Right.
So, like, write your thoughts, right? Like, if you got opinions on it.
Yeah, put it out there. Because it's going to come, even if he ignores it, it's going to be very important when this gets to the courts.
Yeah, it's got to get on the record.
Right. And everyone out there, you should comment. We'll make it real easy. The link will be there every week. You listen to the episode. You're bored. You're looking for like another podcast to listen to. Before you do that, just click the link and throw a quick comment.
Don't do that. Why would you imply that we're boring?
No, they've already listened to our podcast.
Oh.
They were very, very enthralled by what we've had to say.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Now they're bored.
After. I should stop talking.
So, okay, I guess that kind of brings this one to a close.
Yeah.
Let's remind folks out there to subscribe to the podcast.
Yeah.
Just hit the button, especially in iTunes, because it raises us in the rankings.
People find out about it.
Yeah, that's how they find out. A lot of people have actually we haven't been pitching this lately, but the Facebook page. People have been asking me questions left and right lately on the Facebook page, so they are finding it. But, I'll put it's in the show notes every week. We just haven't said it on the show. You can always send us an email at podcast, singular, podcast @groundedreason.com. If you have the, wordsmith, if you're a wordsmith like Wes or the Christopher out there, we might even read it on the air.
Yeah.
So this is Dennis Restaro.
And this is Joel Reeves.
Tip your waitresses and try the veal.
Take care, everyone.